You may remember a year ago when, shortly after returning to the White House, Donald Trump fired several high-ranking military service members who, let's say, just happened to be black and women. They included the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's a big deal, the chief of naval operations, and the U.S. representative to NATO. There was no reason to think any of them had done anything wrong with their duties. Well, today, the New York Times is out with explosive new reporting that gives a little insight into the decisions being made at the Pentagon. The Times reports that this month, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is, quote, unilaterally blocking the promotion of 4 Army officers to be one-star generals, something it's not even clear he has the legal authority to do. It's really, really irregular. The Times explained that 2 of the officers targeted by Hegseth are black and 2 are women. They all had, quote, decades-long records of exemplary service. But Hegseth removed them from a promotion list that consists of about 36 officers, most of whom are white men. The Times is reporting, based on interviews with 11 current and former military officials, 3 of them told the Times about a dust-up last summer. Listen to this. It was between Hegseth's chief of staff, Ricky Burria, and the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll. Now, the Times reports, quote, that Burria chastised the Army Secretary for selecting Major General Antoinette Gant, a combat engineer who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, to take command of the military district of Washington, located there in D.C. Burria told Driscoll that President Trump would not want to stand next to a black female officer at military events. I'm going to repeat that. According to the Times, the chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense told the Secretary of the Army that the President of the United States would not want to stand next to a black woman officer at military events. Now, in that one case last year, the Times reports that Driscoll argued with Burria that, quote, the president is not a racist or sexist. Let you be the judge of that. But General Gant did ultimately get the promotion. The same right now cannot be said for the other 4 this month. Kyle Bibby served as a Marine Corps infantry captain in Afghanistan, as political partner with Truman National Security Project. He's a co-founder and co-CEO of the Black Veterans Project. April Ryan's the longest-serving black White House correspondent, who's now at the Contrarian, where she hosts The Tea with April Ryan, and they both join me now. Kyle, since I have you here, and you yourself are a veteran, just I have to say, I mean, I think the threshold for being shocked is very high these days. I found that quote almost knocked me out of my chair. What's your reaction to it?
Well, I think a lot of people are going to be obviously shocked, but not necessarily surprised, as they say. If you look at this history that we've had at this administration, I mean, you opened with the firing of General Brown, Admiral Franchetti. There was the controversy around Black history being removed from the DoD websites. After some uproar, they silently put it back.
They scrubbed Jackie Robinson, of all people, and his service off the DoD website.
Yeah. So, you know, there was the controversy regarding Christian nationalist religious leaders being brought to speak to the troops. I think that it's a very clear message that's being sent here to service members, to people who maybe are thinking of joining the military, that black service members are not welcome, that women are not welcome. The rules and changes to expel gay and transgender service members, you know, it is a very clear message that this is a military that's going to be led by a white nationalist movement.
April Ryan, having covered this administration and having been the target of some of the president's vitriol and venom at times, your reaction to this reporting from the Times?
It's great reporting, but there is hypocrisy from this administration. If we just look back a couple of weeks ago, Condoleezza Rice, who at one time happened to be then President George W. Bush's one of his chief confidants and Secretary of State, and also in the intelligence community, happened to be at the White House recently. And she was in the East Room. And current President Donald Trump pulled her to the side, and they walked back down the red carpet back to the elevator, and to talk. And this is around the time of the beginning of the war with Iran. So there's hypocrisy there. And then also think about this as Hegseth doesn't want to deal with DEI. Think about who has been in the military from almost the inception of this nation when we were fighting wars. It's enslaved Africans. You cannot erase that history. And Truman was the first president to officially integrate the wars. African Americans have been fighting in U.S. wars since before the Civil War. So they need to get their history right and figure out what they're going to do, because you can't change this history. The facts are the facts.
You know, it's striking to me, and I don't want to overstate the case about the U.S. Armed Forces, but it does strike me that in a country that can be very segregated in many ways, if you just look at like the demographics we have in residential segregation and education, that, to April's point, you know, it was one of the first institutions to be desegregated in the United States. It was one of the early civil rights fights in the 20th century, before the sort of peak of that civil rights, those desegregation fights in the 50s and 60s. That it also has been kind of a model of pluralism and integration and sort of multiracial coming together, and to watch what Pete Hegseth is doing to it just seems so anathema to them.
Yeah, you know, I think there's, you know, that old saying, accusations are confessions. You know, Pete Hegseth comes into this saying, oh, he's going to depoliticize the military. It's the exact opposite of what these people are doing. They are, again, interested in a white nationalist project. And unfortunately, you know, it really is... it undermines really the centerpiece of military history. As you said, one of the first institutions to desegregate, U.S. military. People generally view the military as a place where meritocracy and you know, supporting one another is very important for our role, because our lives may depend on the people next to us. And we've always been a reflection of this country. So, you know, to implement what we've been calling this sort of like neo-segregationist movement within the military and within our broader society, it really serves not just as a slap in the face of people who served, but also ultimately makes us less safe. We don't have a safe democracy without a representative military.
Well, and also, April, I mean, your point there about the sort of, you know, they have couched everything as, quote, DEI and wokeness and on and on and on. I mean, I think it doesn't really even pass the sniff test or laugh test when you're talking about like promotions to one-star general. It just that is not what's going on here. Quite clearly, it's not. But it seems to me that they have used that rhetoric to basically smuggle in what is just very old-fashioned discrimination, like not giving someone a promotion because they're black or a woman is just a straightforward violation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, illegal under statute, but also just the oldest thing in the book. It's not, there's nothing newfangled about it.
Right. Chris, I can't help but think, just hours before we go into the No King's Day, this is once again an effort to gin up the base. But I also think about the fact that this is something that can quell the morale or quench the morale, let's say that, of black service members. What is it? How many, what's the percentage of black service members in the infantry? About 40%. If I were black and hear that, I would say, well, why am I here? I can't, there's no room to rise. And I can't also help but think about the late, great General Colin Powell, who believed in affirmative action. He was a Republican. Many Republicans didn't agree, but he understood the basis of what the military was founded on. And he kept promoting that. And then you have Hegseth, who is anti-woke, anti-DEI. This administration is making it clear who they support and who they don't, but they're not standing with what has happened in the Republican Party and what this country has done when it comes to the military. Who would want to support and fight in the military, seriously, when if you are a minority thinking that you have no room to rise to greater heights?
Yeah, that point, I mean, we're having this conversation as U.S. members are being deployed, service members are headed to the Gulf for a possible to be sent into extremely dangerous ground invasion of Iran. And the folks that are on those transports are black and white and Latino and Asian and gay and straight and all the sort of panoply of American life. And this is something they're going to be reading on their phones as they head towards that danger.
Yeah, it's a real slap in the face, you know, to think that you would be sent downrange on a mission, you know, another potentially endless war in the Middle East with no defined strategy or goals. And then you're going to come back to the United States and have Pete Hegseth cherry pick your promotion after your peers go through a robust process of determining whether or not you're worthy of that rank. It's a slap in the face. And quite frankly, you know, it's going to undermine the morale of the troops, I'm sure.
Kyle Bibby and April Ryan, thank you both for making a little time for us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.